Jake here for American Trucks, and in this video, I'm taking a look at the AFE Rapid Induction Cold Air Intake with the Pro 5R oiled filter in black, fitting 2021 and newer EcoBoost F-150s. Now this intake is going to appeal to the F-150 owner who's looking for a premium, no tune required option that's going to maximize airflow and performance. This setup from AFE gets you a pair of oversized filters and high quality materials to make for a good looking and good sounding intake that will make a difference in your driving experience. AFE has been in the aftermarket intake game for a long time, and it shows in their products. This one in particular I find very intriguing because it offers a number of cool features that set it apart from the rest of the pack. Starting with those filters. Now, unlike some others that give you just one large filter, AFE gives you two here, one effectively for each turbo. Each filter measures 8 inches tall and you get 360 degrees of airflow. So these two together make for a much larger surface area than your stock air filter. That's going to mean more airflow, and more airflow can translate into better response and power. Now these ones in particular are what AFE calls their Pro 5R filters. So these are an oil design, and that's great because that oil on the surface gives you an extra layer of protection that can help filter out fine dirt and particulates. So if you are out running in dirt or on trails, these will better filter out dirt and debris than the equivalent dry filter. They also still flow exceptionally well. In fact, AFE claims these flow about 34% better than your factory filter. Oiled filters can also be cleaned, re-oiled, and reused, so maintenance is easy, and these are going to last you a long time. So if you plan on keeping your truck for a while, oiled filters are a great choice because it's going to save you from replacing those filters every year or so. But there's more to this system than just the filters. In fact, I think the rest of this setup is even more interesting. Now this is going to maintain a closed box design, however, it only includes the lid. Now this is going to replace the lid of your stock air box, but it keeps the bottom half of that stock air box intact, meaning that this is truly a cold air intake as it's pulling a majority of its air from outside of the truck and not from the hot engine bay. But feeding the turbos, you get two separate aluminum intake tubes. These also have a small crossover pipe, sort of like an H pipe you'd find in an exhaust. It's going to give you a little bit better flow and allow for equalization of pressure. And the large diameter of these pipes means that your turbos are going to be able to take advantage of the increased airflow from those filters, but because they're aluminum and they're large, they're also going to make a great noise. So you're going to hear a lot more of that turbo whistle. If you like that intake and turbo noise, you're really going to like this one. One last point to make here is that this is again a no tune required intake, so a separate tune is not needed to make it work properly on your F-150. If you want to make the most of a new intake or other breather mods though, as I always say, a tune is certainly going to be the way to do it. As with any intake, don't go in expecting huge power gains from the intake alone, but you'll likely notice a difference in response if nothing else. And of course, your results may vary depending on your truck and the conditions under which you drive. Now, we're not putting this one on the dyno to verify power numbers, but you can still expect a slight increase in overall power. The filters are a 5-layer cotton gauze media with a polyurethane frame, and AFE claims 98.6% filtration efficiency with those as well. The intake tubes again and the heat shield too are both made from aluminum and finished in a wrinkle black powder coat for durability, heat resistance, and good looks. And you get all the connectors and clamps included in the kit, and in general, everything is very high quality as you would expect from an intake like this. Pricing for this one comes in at about $975, which does put it towards the top end of the category. This is a premium option and thus commands a premium price, but it has really solid construction, good airflow, and it offers an easy bolt-on installation as well. So if you're looking for a high quality setup for your truck, it's not going to cost you a lot of time to install. This is going to be a great choice. Speaking of which, installation gets a 1 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should only take you about an hour to complete. Again, this is a totally bolt-on install, and you don't even need to remove the bottom of the stock air box like we discussed earlier. So this is a pretty simple process. So not much more we can say about it here. With that, let's go ahead and hand things over to one of our AT customers who's going to walk you through the process.
All right, just a quick recap of the tools we used. We had both a 9/32 and a 5/16 socket. I just use a quarter inch drive. You can use whatever size you have, 3/8, half-inch drive, whatever. Couple extensions are handy depending on how you want things to be oriented and how you're going to position them. Flathead screwdriver was handy just to get the IAT sensor housing lock tab undone. You likely won't need the plastic pry tool unless you're going to opt to do the scoop as well, the dynamic air scoop. Otherwise, again, 5/32 Allen key, or you can use a standard Allen key. If you have the blue or the gray connectors, you don't need the actual quick disconnect tool. Otherwise, if you happen to have the orange one, you'll need this 5/8 quick disconnect tool to release that vent tube quick connector. Otherwise, I do recommend the Sharpie marker, some kind of straight edge, just to mark that vent tube insert so you know the proper position when you're doing it. And that's about it. Pretty easy job overall. Not a lot in terms of tools required, all very easily accessible on the top of the truck. I would say it's definitely a 1 wrencher out of 3. All right, so we're ready to get started here. The first thing, to remove this factory air box assembly, we need to loosen up the hose clamp here, loosen up the hose clamp here, which is same size socket required. Factory is 9/32. I'm just using a 1/4 inch drive socket with an extension. So we're going to start up with that. Let's loosen these up. Okay, top one's loose. For mine, the head of this is most easily accessible here from the back. And that should be loose enough. We're also going to pop these 2 clips to free up the air filter housing. It simply has a couple tabs that hold it in place to the factory air box. The bottom of the air box assembly is going to stay and remain, as we're just replacing the top piece of this. But the last thing we have to do here is make sure that our hoses are free from this assembly before we pull it out. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this coolant line out of the clip that holds it in there. And then we have our IAT sensor on the back side here. Now, this does have a small locking tab. You can see it on the back side here, this small gray locking tab. We're just gonna lift up, turn the sensor, and then wiggle it out. So with that sensor removed, while I'm working, I chose to just take a small plastic household bag. We're gonna cover that up just to make sure that it stays clean, doesn't get any undue debris on it. We're just gonna kind of cover that up. And we're gonna set that aside for the moment. Now, at this point in time, our airbox assembly should be fairly free to come off. So we're going to pull this top tube off, followed by our bottom tube, and there you go. That's the removal of the factory. We're going to also pop this factory air filter out, and we're ready to get started. All right, so for this next step, we're going to go ahead with this disassembled nice and open and remove the factory scoop and replace it with AFE's dynamic air scoop system. So let's get started by just popping this out. Now, this screw down here, the single screw that holds it to the air filter housing, is in fact a 5/16, which happens to be the same size we're gonna need for the new hose clamps that come with the AFE kit. As with many things, patience with removing some of these screws can be a virtue. Okay, we have our single screw out. We're just gonna set it up here to hold it. And while we're doing that, we're gonna take our plastic clip. You have 2 of these kind of factory plastic retaining clips that just pop up like so. And can then be removed. We have the 2 locking pieces out. Now just kind of flip the tool and grab the rest of that out. And as you can see, this is now nice and loose. We can go ahead and set our clips aside. We're going to remove this from the factory airbox, like so. So we're taking our AFE DAS scoop. It did come with this silicone seal that was separate, very easy to just slide on to the product, sits and seats very nicely. The first thing we're gonna do is kind of maneuver it into our airbox. What a perfect fit. Lines up perfectly here in the front as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this first screw back in. I'm gonna start it by hand, just to make sure we don't have anything falling down. And we'll take our socket and go ahead and tighten it up. Okay, that feels pretty good. All right, so the factory Ford plugs, I tend to like these because they have a nice kind of popping mechanism that helps provide tension on the bottom that spreads out and locks them in place, but they tend to be a little bit easier to remove. Where the alternates that AFE gives you are just these press style plugs, not a big deal at all, you know, for installation or removal, but they actually are pretty beefy. Oh, that holds nice. So maybe that's why they give you these, because of the thickness of that plastic. And if you're getting into bigger modifications in the truck in the future, it has been noted, I've read some reviews, that the factory airbox can tend to get compressed under higher pressure if you're doing big horsepower upgrades. So while we're here, we were going to go ahead and do that anyway. So that's all there is to the DAS scoop. So now we can dive into the rest of the install here for, again, the rapid induction system by AFE. Okay, so one of the first steps here, we get this engine tube, and you get a warning here. It says, warning, make sure you install this vent fitting insert to prevent the check engine light. And this is to make sure that you're getting the proper vacuum back into the system to prevent any issues with check engine lights. So they do tell you that you're looking for basically the valve cover vent tube that feeds into the driver's side turbo, closest to the turbo. So we're going to show you that in a minute. But essentially, you see this 45-degree kind of slash cut that needs to face towards the turbo, and this is going to install in the tube like this. So just a recommendation, I'm going to go ahead and mark this vent tube. Because the turbo is going to be facing towards the vehicle, I'll be able to see this side best. So we're just going to make sure that I kind of take this piece and figure out how best to do this. I'm going to go ahead and just line this up and take a Sharpie marker or whatever your marking method is and just draw a little line on it. It's just a visual indication. It's going to make sure that I get that installed in the right orientation, as that part is critical. Now, the other piece that I mentioned a little earlier, you may or may not need this angle disconnect toolkit. Now, I needed one in my case. So they tell you in the instructions, check the color of the locking tab on the quick disconnect fitting. If the locking tab is orange, then you got to go to steps 10 and 11. If it's blue or gray, then you go to steps 12. So when we look at steps 10 and 11, it's going to talk a little bit about these disconnecting tools, and you need, in this case, a 5/8 quick disconnect tool to be able to get that connector off. Now we'll go ahead and show you. My connector happened to be an orange one. Now, if for some reason you have a blue or a gray one, it has you skipping over here to step 12, where those are pretty nice. They don't require a tool. It's got a simple tab that you would just slide over there to the left, and that's gonna release that clip from the harness. So double check that. If you're anything like me, you lay everything out and you find out, oh crap, I got the orange one and I don't have the tool. Luckily, I was able to go to local auto parts store. They had them readily available. So if you plan it out, check your color connector. You could probably get one, online somewhere at a better value. I'm sure American Trucks even offers them, but nonetheless was able to find one pretty easy. Okay, so here's the vent tube that we're talking about. Pretty easy to access with all of this open. The tool I have is probably not legible on the camera, but it is labeled 5/8. We're gonna go ahead and snap that sucker under there. apply a little bit of pressure to release, and pops right off. Super easy. So now we're going to take our vent tube that we just marked, and we need to line it up so that that slash faces towards the turbo. Now our turbo's right down there. We can see the pipes flowing down that way. So we want that 45-degree to kind of go right in line with that tube. And it is a kind of snug fit, so it's not gonna move on us. Happy with how that's looking. We're gonna go ahead and push that all the way down seated and take our quick connect and pop back on. You heard that nice satisfying snap, lets you know it's locked back in, not gonna come off, and that piece is done. All right, so our next step is we're going to take the air filters themselves and install it in the housing on the top. I've pulled these out. I happen to opt for the oiled air filters, and you can see clearly from the bag it says factory pre-oiled. They do offer a dry option as well. Whatever works for your intended application. For me, this was the best solution. I'm gonna pull this ring off, and you can kind of see here that there are some tabs built into this filter casing that are gonna help it lock into place on the actual housing. So we're gonna take our first one, come from the bottom, and here you can see, we wanna make sure that I'm just popping that through. So our tabs are showing through, kind of locking that air filter in place. We're gonna do the same with the second one here. Just pop those through, nice and easy. Checking the bottom. Oh, that one wasn't all the way through. My OCD nature, I'm making sure they're kind of aligned the same. So we're gonna take these ring clamps. We're going to take these ring clamps, so you can see, and just put them back over. We're now going to move over to the truck and get this installed. But first, one step that I need to do first, I'm going to show you real quick. There's a wiring harness right over here on the top of our battery box. I believe these couple of holder clips need to be removed prior to installation here. We're just going to go ahead and pop those right out and set that over the side for the moment. Okay. We can now take our assembly, and we're going to kind of come over here and install it. Make sure your locking tabs are facing forward and out of the way. You can see on this actual AFE housing there are a couple tabs, so rather than going in from the front, they're actually going to hook in from the back. So I'm going to just angle this back side in and get this right in place. Happy with that. I'm going to come around to the front of the vehicle. Made sure that our filter again was aligned and that all of our kind of locking tabs protrude through the actual filter housing. Was also able to kind of push this and snap it into place. A little easier, I find, if you put some pressure on the rounded part here rather than trying to lift up from the tab is a little more difficult to do. So we're going to take a quick pause and take a look at the instructions again and get ready for the next step. All right, the next step is to actually get this IAT sensor installed into the new AFE power tube. You could do this by a couple of different ways. I don't know that you have to actually remove the sensor from the harness, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to do that so that we can install the sensor on the new power tube on the table over there. And so from the factory, you get this kind of tape that just holds this wire tail back a little bit. We are gonna have to pull this tape off. Not a big deal. A piece of electrical tape or suitable wire loom tape will work to put that back. We're just gonna press down here on this black tab. You can use a screwdriver, even your thumb works fine. I'm gonna pull the sensor itself out. We're gonna put the harness off to the side. We're gonna take our sensor over to the table here. Anytime I'm dealing with sensors that have an O-ring like this, I like to take just a little bit of oil, and AFE recommends you do the same. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a little dab of oil on my finger here and oil up that O-ring. And what this is gonna do is just ensure that it doesn't rip and gives it kind of a smooth surface to slip into its new home in the AFE power tube housing. So from there, we're gonna take this. We have our tube right here. This is where our IAT is gonna go into this. We're just going to, oh, there we go. And you can see there's a tiny little indent there, and she's locked into place. That's the locking tab, the small locking tab that we talked about before. And so our sensor's in her new home and ready to go. We can even see it kind of protruding through the pipe on the inside. Now we're gonna get these pipes ready to install. All right, the next step is we're gonna take this 3.5 by 3 inch silicone reducer. Make sure you take your hose clamps and seat them on here first. Definitely something you want to make sure that they're on before you seat these onto the tube. So I'm going to start by just kind of taking this silicone piece and putting it onto the factory air tube over to the passenger side. It is a tight fit, so it takes a little manipulation. And we're on. So we got that on. We're gonna roughly angle it up. Now we have our new power tube. It's gonna install just like so into our air filter, and the other end into the silicone reducing sleeve that we just installed. And be careful, because these air filters, you know, right now they don't have much other than those rubber lips that were pretty easy to push through, holding them in. So we are gonna have to play a little bit with the alignment, but we're gonna leave all this loose right now until such time that we're ready to make our permanent connections. Okay, so we have one side of our new AFE power tubes kind of just loosely mounted in place. We can still move our clamps around and position this. I will say, you know, take precaution to make sure you have adequate clearance from your tube. You don't want that right up against your coolant tank. You know, it could cause some noises and rattling around, whatever the case may be. But we'll get the fitment all dialed in. So the next thing is we're gonna take our 4-inch by 3.5 inch silicone reducing tube. Again, get those retaining clamps in place first, and we're going to install this on the driver's side part. That went on pretty nice, pretty easy. Just going to make sure that that's seated happy on the bottom, and it is. And I was just feeling with my hand the tab down there. We're going to kind of just keep our clamps in place. Now we're going to head back over to the table to prep our last tube for the next step. All right, next we're going to take our last little silicone adapter here. It's going to go on our driver's side power tube like so. That just kind of fits over there, making sure it's nice and aligned so we get the Cole logo on top, and that's pretty sweet, like laser etched, you know, aluminum plate there. That's pretty cool. Again, big thing, make sure you get these clamps on first and foremost. This one I actually had to loosen here a little bit. It's a snug one. Okay, just gonna get our clamps in place. Now we're gonna take it over to the truck. All right, and here we have our last pipe here. We're gonna go ahead and kind of get this silicone. Oh, accidentally pulled. This is kind of why you want to leave things nice and loose to get it lined up. And wow, that was like too easy. I think they engineered this thing or something. But boy, that went together very nicely. Okay, we're gonna take another look around, make sure things are snugged up the way we like. Alrighty, gonna take a look to. We want to make sure these tubes are parallel, which in this case they certainly are. We want to make sure those are seated nice in our filters and that nothing is rubbing, and I think we're in really good shape. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and take my IAT sensor that accidentally fell down into the battery box, or the air filter box rather, and we're going to get our sensor plugged back in just so we don't forget that. Perfect. And we'll come back and make sure that's nicely addressed. So from here we can go ahead and start tightening up our clamps. Now we have things where we want them to be, and I'm going to start with this top tube. Make sure my ratchet's going the right way. Let's see if I can start this guy by hand. See how far it does feel a little loose. Yeah, there we go. I'm kind of a snob about the clamps. I don't like seeing the ugly side of the ring clamp, so I tried to be thoughtful about where I'm positioning these, as well as wanting to make sure that I had access to them to be able to snug them down. Now again, this is plastic, it's forgiving, but we don't want to go too much. You can see here that silicone pulled in pretty nice. So for this next one, I'm gonna come down and get this guy from under here. That gives me the warm fuzzies that I don't have to look at it, but it's still reasonably accessible. Here we're tightening down onto the metal tube, which will have a little bit more rigidity to it than the plastic. Yeah, I can feel that getting in tight. That is nice and snug. And again, I can still see that I'm starting to make an impression in that silicone, which is very flexible, very nice to work with. Super happy about that. I'm gonna pivot and go to the driver's side here. Again, making sure my silicone reducer is where I want it to be. This guy is super loose, so we're definitely gonna start him by hand, or her. Actually, I'm gonna rotate it up. A lot easier to do when they are exposed and visible. Again, it's just my OCD. Don't have to do it my way. Function's going to be the same. I will say that we didn't caveat this, but depending on the vehicle you're putting these in, they're tall trucks. I'm 5'11", but to really get in here and see what you're doing, you're going to want a step ladder. So we're working on step ladders here. Unfortunately, or fortunately, our garage is being built as we speak. So this project's happening in the driveway. But hopefully, in the future, we'll be doing our wrenching from a beautiful new garage. So now that I have it positioned down where I want it, go ahead and just snug this up. feel it's starting to get snug. Again, you don't need to muscle this, but I'm just kind of watching how the silicone is flexing, and these are sitting in there nice. So that's not going anywhere. Got our last one. I'm definitely gonna make this harder on myself than it needs to be. We're just getting it started. Alright. Well, that's gotta start. I'm gonna get her seated where we want her final resting place to be. And I think that's pretty good. And I'm gonna take a quick look here to see how easiest. I think an extension is going to work out well in this case, but I could be wrong. Not a lot of room, but enough to get in there. And at the end of the day, I'll feel good knowing that I don't have to look at these. I'm just going to play a little bit with that position. Make sure it's everywhere I want it to be. We're well within the lip of the little housing. I'm actually gonna back that off just a second and raise it a little bit. Prefer it to have a little bit more of a bite further onto the power pipe itself. There we go. Hey, can't get much better than that. And back to snugging it up. You can feel it, getting tension on it. That's a good thing. And we just want to make sure they're snug. We don't need to muscle these down. I don't want to crush the tubes. That's not the goal here. All right, we're back. We cut a piece of tape. Again, just gonna kind of put this back where it was from the factory. This happens to be some nice wire loom kind of grade tape. You know, anything will really do. We're just trying to keep a little bit of the tension off of the end of that wire, which we shouldn't have any at all anyway. Beautiful. Okay, now doing a little research, many different styles of these cold air intake systems. AFE does come with a cover that goes over this. Some of them are open elements. Now, they do say you can run this one open. Pros, cons, you might get a little bit more of that sound you're after leaving it open, which is perfectly fine. However, at an idle or standstill, when the vehicle's not moving, you'll probably get a little bit of more heat buildup within the engine compartment. All right, and we're back. We got our heat shield plate. We're gonna install. It sits very nicely right on top here. And it does come with 4, these are Allen head. You can use regular Allen key tools for this. I happen to have socket set that are Allens. These are 5/32 size heads as well. You'll see we have a screw here in the front. We're just gonna get it started by hand. And then there's a screw here on the back side closest to your firewall. Same deal, we're gonna get that started and snugged up by hand. And I'm gonna hop around to the front here of the vehicle where we have 2 more. One towards the firewall side, one towards the front of the vehicle. Also getting started. These thread in really nice. This is nice hardware too. Seems to be stainless. I gotta say, overall, the quality of this, it really went together nice. It fits nice. It looks good. You know, it wasn't a long install. Probably should take you about 45 minutes or so. you know, plus or minus, depending. If you're like me and you lay everything out, you plan it out, and you know, get a little bit particular about the way things are oriented, you might spend a little bit longer, but you shouldn't spend too much longer. Even videoing this, and this is the first time I'm doing one of these, didn't take much over an hour.
That's going to wrap it up for our review and install of the AFE Rapid Induction Cold Air Intake with the Pro 5R oil filter in black, fitting 2021 and newer EcoBoost F-150s. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, for all things F-150, be sure to keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.